My world shattered into a million irreparable pieces the moment I saw the familiar silver BMW of my best friend, Nick, parked in my driveway at 1:47 a.m. on a Tuesday. It wasn't just a car. It was the way it was parked, haphazardly at an angle, as if the driver had been in a desperate hurry. The soft, ghostly glow from the second-floor bedroom window of our colonial-style house confirmed everything I had, for months, fearfully suspected and vehemently denied. My wife, Elena, was upstairs with him. The two people I trusted most in this world had fused their betrayal into a single, devastating image. I didn't storm in. I didn't honk the horn or start screaming. A strange, glacial calm descended over me. I simply reversed my own car, parked it 3 houses down under the skeletal branches of an old oak tree, and killed the engine. I sat there in the oppressive silence, watching that rectangle of yellow light. Shadows moved behind the blinds, a dance I knew all too well, now perverted. I felt my heart, a frantic drum just minutes ago during the drive home from the canceled Denver conference, slow to a dull, dead thud. It wasn't heartbreak I felt first. It was a profound, seismic shift in my understanding of reality. The foundation of my life for the past 7 years, 5 of them as husband and wife, was not just cracked. It had been a meticulously constructed illusion, and it had just collapsed into dust. I must have sat there for an hour, maybe 2. The light eventually went out. The house, our home, stood dark and silent, a tomb from my former life. Only then did I start the car and drive to a bleak, anonymous airport hotel. I didn't sleep. I stared at the textured ceiling, replaying every suspicious moment, every unexplained late night at work, every subtle deflection, every time she protectively angled her phone screen away. The puzzle pieces, which I'd refused to assemble, now clicked together with cruel, obvious clarity. The next morning, operating on a kind of grim autopilot, I went to the office. I was a senior software architect, and my discipline saved me. I compartmentalized. I attended a morning stand-up meeting, my voice sounding strangely flat and distant even to my own ears. At noon, I made the call, not to Elena, to Amanda Reed, a divorce attorney whose name had been discreetly recommended by a colleague years ago during a casual conversation about worst-case scenarios. I'd never imagined I'd need it. Her voice was crisp, professional, devoid of pity. "Come to my office at 4, she said. It wasn't suggestion. I never went back to the house in Winnetka. I sent a moving company for my essentials a week later, when I knew Elena would be at work. Our communication devolved into terse, logistical emails drafted by our lawyers. My initial petition was straightforward: divorce on grounds of adultery, an equitable split of assets. I had no appetite for a drawn-out fight. I just wanted out, to cauterize the wound and begin the impossible task of healing. Her response, delivered via her lawyer's ornate letterhead, was a declaration of total war. It was a masterpiece of malicious fiction. Elena didn't deny the adultery. She reframed it. Her counterclaim alleged a years-long pattern of systematic emotional abuse, coercive financial control, and gaslighting that had left her isolated and psychologically fragile. She claimed my volatile temper and cold neglect had stunted her career and driven her into the arms of another for basic human comfort. The audacity was breathtaking. We had met as equals at a tech conference, both rising stars. She was a powerhouse marketing director who commanded 6-figure deals. Our finances were separate, our accounts joint only for household expenses, a system she herself had insisted upon for independence. Her demands were equally breathtaking. Spousal support of $8,000 a month for 5 years, plus 70% of the equity in-house, which was in both our names, and a significant portion of my investment portfolio, which I had built before the marriage. This wasn't about need. This was about punishment. This was about making me pay literally and figuratively, for the sin of catching her and having the temerity to leave instead of begging for forgiveness. She's constructing a narrative, Amanda explained, her fingers steepled. We were in her sleek, minimalist office overlooking the Chicago River. It's a common tactic. Make you the villain to gain leverage. The goal is to scare you into a more favorable settlement for her. The problem is, she needs witnesses to back up this story. Friends, colleagues, family. A cold knot tightened in my stomach. Family. My relationship with my parents, Richard and Cynthia Miller, and my younger brother, Daniel, had been a slow-motion erosion for years. It began subtly after my big promotion and the subsequent bonus that bought the Winnetka house. My father's hardware store in Milwaukee was struggling against big-box retailers. Daniel, always chasing the next big score, drifted between commission-based sales jobs. Conversations gradually shifted from "how are you?" to "the store roof is leaking," or "Dan's car broke down again." The loans started $5,000 for a tax bill, $3,000 for a medical scare that turned out to be minor, $10,000 for a can't-miss investment opportunity Daniel had found. I paid, initially out of a sense of familial duty, then out of guilt, and finally out of a weary desire to avoid conflict. The breaking point came a year ago. Daniel had come to me with a scheme involving cryptocurrency mining. He wanted $50,000. I'd done my research. It was a scam or close to it. I said no. Not just no, but I finally laid down a boundary. I told them all that the Bank of Mark was permanently closed, that I had my own future, a future that then included starting a family with Elena, to plan for. The fallout was nuclear. My father accused me of being greedy, of forgetting where I came from. My mother wept long-distance tears about how family helps family. Daniel called me a selfish bastard. The holiday gatherings that followed were tense, silent affairs. The last time I saw them, at a stilted Christmas dinner, the air was so thick with resentment you could choke on it. Elena had been my sole ally through it, or so I thought, holding my hand on the table, whispering support. Now, Amanda's words hung in the air. She's listed them, Mark. Your parents and your brother are on her witness list. They've given signed affidavits. The document felt like a live wire in my hands. The language was a grotesque parody. My father claimed to have witnessed my controlling nature since adolescence. My mother described Elena as a frightened little bird who confided in her about my dark moods. Daniel painted a picture of me as a financial tyrant who enjoyed wielding money as a weapon. They were describing a stranger, a monster of their collective creation, and the timing was too perfect. My father's store had a new roof. Daniel was driving a late-model SUV. The math was sickeningly simple. They had exchanged their testimony for a cash infusion from Elena. They had monetized their son and brother. They're lying. I said, my voice hoarse. They're being paid to lie. We can imply that, Amanda said carefully. But proving a direct bribe is difficult. We'll focus on their credibility, their bias, their financial incentives. We'll also need to build you up as the credible one. This is now a character war. The deposition was a descent into a special, intimate hell. It took place in a sterile conference room. My family entered, avoiding my eyes. They were sworn in. Watching my father, a man who'd taught me to throw a baseball, describe me as having a mean streak he'd always feared, was a physical agony. My mother, twisting a lace handkerchief, spun a tale of Elena's whispered confidences that had never happened. Daniel, with a barely concealed smirk, detailed my supposed financial manipulation. When Amanda cross-examined them, pressing on their recent unexplained financial upgrades, they stammered, contradicted each other, and grew flushed with a mixture of shame and defiance. The court reporter's keys tapped like insects, etching their perjury into the official record. The divorce trial itself was a brutal, week-long affair. Elena played her part beautifully. The subdued, wounded wife, flinching subtly when I spoke. Her lawyer painted me as a cold, calculating tech bro who'd emotionally abandoned his vibrant wife. But Amanda was a surgeon. She dismantled their narrative piece by piece. She presented records of Elena's stellar career trajectory, her six-figure bonuses, emails showing her as a decisive one in our financial decisions. She called mutual friends who were baffled by the abuse claims, describing us as a power couple, if anything, with Elena often in the driver's seat. The climax came when Amanda confronted my family with their own financial records, subpoenaed and laid bare. The correlation between the dates of Elena's liquid cash withdrawals and deposits into their accounts was a damning, near-perfect match. Judge Henderson, a man with the weary eyes of someone who'd seen every permutation of human spite, watched intently. On the day of the ruling, the courtroom felt airless. Judge Henderson spoke without theatrics. He found Elena's claims of abuse not credible and contradicted by the preponderance of evidence. He noted the highly problematic and financially motivated testimony of my family, which he gave little to no weight. He denied spousal support entirely, citing the short duration of the marriage and her equal earning capacity. The house was to be sold, proceeds split 50-50ths. My investment portfolio remained mine. As the gavel fell, Elena shot me a look of pure, unadulterated hatred. My family scurried out without a backward glance. I walked out of the courthouse into the Chicago sunlight, feeling hollow, not victorious. I had legally divorced a cheat and morally divorced a family of mercenaries. I was 34 years old and utterly alone. The numbness that followed was almost worse than the pain. I moved into a stark, modern apartment in the Loop, all concrete and glass, a deliberate contrast to the warm, curated home I'd shared. I worked punishing 16-hour days, losing myself in complex code architecture. My company was launching a new cloud security platform, and I became the de facto lead, a machine fueled by caffeine and quiet rage. The project was a wild success. 6 months after the divorce was finalized, I was called into the CEO's office and promoted to vice president of engineering, with a compensation package that made my previous salary look like pocket change. The money was a numb afterthought, but the power it symbolized wasn't. It represented control, autonomy, and a form of armor. It was then, sitting in my new corner office with a view of the skyline, that the simmering fury finally boiled over. The betrayal hadn't been settled. It had been papered over by a judge's decree. Elena had walked away unscathed. Freed me with Nick, her reputation barely singed. My family had profited from their lies and suffered no consequence. They had tried to destroy me for a quick payout. The cold, analytical part of my brain, the part that built flawless systems, identified this as an unresolved error, a vulnerability. It needed to be corrected. I went back to Amanda Reed. "I want to sue them," I said, my voice eerily calm. "All of them." She listened, her expression unreadable. "On what grounds?" "The divorce is over. Malicious prosecution for Elena. She initiated a baseless legal action to extort money. For my family, intentional infliction of emotional distress. Civil conspiracy. They conspired with her to defame me and interfere with the judicial process." Amanda leaned back. "It's actionable. Difficult, but actionable. The bar for emotional distress is high, but their testimony, combined with a financial motive, could clear it." "What's your goal?" "Justice," I said, but that was too abstract. "I want them to feel a fraction of the financial and emotional ruin they try to bring on me. I'm suing each of them for $75,000. The lawsuits were filed the following week. The reactions were a study in contrasts. Elena's response, through her new lawyer, was a furious bluster of motions to dismiss, threatening countersuits for harassment. My family's reaction was pure, unvarnished panic. My phone, which had been blissfully silent with them blocked, began to light up with calls from unknown numbers. Voicemails piled up, each a variation on a theme. My mother, voice thick with tears. "Mark, baby, please. This is your family. You can't do this to us. We made a mistake. We were confused. She lied to us, too." My father, trying, failing to sound authoritative. "Son, this has gone far enough. You won. Be the bigger man. Drop this nonsense before you regret it." Daniel, snarling. "You greedy piece of work. After everything Mom and Dad did for you, you're going to bankrupt your own family? I always knew you were a cold-hearted snake." I deleted them all without listening to the end. Their definition of family was a one-sided contract where I provided limitless funds in exchange for the mere title of son. They had revoked their membership the moment they accepted Elena's blood money. The legal process began to grind. Discovery requests were sent. The prospect of having to open their books, to be deposed again under oath about their finances, was clearly terrifying them. Their desperation reached a new pitch a month in. I was leaving my apartment building for a dawn run when I found Daniel leaning against the wall in the lobby, looking worn and unshaven. "We need to talk, Mark," he said, stepping in front of the glass doors. "We have nothing to talk about. Your lawyer can speak to my lawyer." "Damn it, just listen," he hissed, keeping his voice low as an elderly neighbor passed by. "You're killing Mom. The stress, she's not sleeping. Dad's talking about selling the store to pay legal fees. Is that what you want?" I looked at him, this stranger who shared my DNA. What I wanted, I said, each word like a chip of ice, was for my brother not to sell lies about me to my cheating wife for a down payment on an SUV. "You made your choice. Live with it." His bravado cracked. "It wasn't like that. She came to us. She was crying. She said you were lying about the affair, that you were abusive, and she needed our help to protect herself. She showed us fake text messages. She said if we help her get what she deserved from the divorce, she'd make sure we were taken care of. We were angry at you for cutting us off." We believed her. It was the closest to an admission I would ever get. "So you chose to believe a woman you knew was capable of a months-long affair over your own brother. For money, the price of your belief was 75 grand? Or did you get a bulk discount?" He flinched. "We'll pay you back. What she gave us. We'll give it to you. Just call off the lawsuit." "The lawsuit isn't about recovering her bribes," I said. "It's about the cost of the betrayal. The price is now non-negotiable." I pushed past him and out into the crisp morning air, my heart hammering not from the impending run, but from a corrosive mix of fury and a terrible, aching grief. His visit, however, planted a seed. The fury was exhausting. The thought of another year of litigation, of depositions, of having my family's avaricious faces in my life, was soul-crushing. I discussed it with Amanda. "A settlement is a guaranteed result," she advised. "A trial is a roll of the dice, even with a strong case, and it will drain you emotionally and financially, even if you can afford it." After a week of tortured deliberation, I made a decision. I called Daniel from a block number. He answered on the first ring, voice wary. "Tell them I'll settle." I said, no greeting, $120,000. From all four of you combined. You figure out how to split it. It comes with a comprehensive non-disclosure and non-disparagement agreement. And it includes a strict, permanent no-contact order. You wire the money, sign the papers, and you cease to exist in my world. This is the only offer. It expires in 48 hours. The silence on the other end was profound. Then a shaky, I'll talk to them. The negotiation was tense but swift. Their lawyer tried to haggle, but Amanda was immovable. They were cornered. Within 3 weeks, the settlement was executed. The money, a wire transfer of $120,000, arrived. I didn't keep a cent. I donated the entire sum anonymously to the Chicago Haven, a charity that provided legal and therapeutic support for victims of psychological abuse and coercive control. It felt poetically just. Let their blood money do some actual good. I felt profound, if brittle, peace for about 8 weeks. The legal machinery had stopped. The silence was finally real. I focused on work, on rebuilding a social life with the few friends who had remained staunchly neutral or supportive. I started seeing a therapist to untangle the knot of betrayal and grief. I was healing. Then on a bleak, rain-slushed Sunday afternoon, my intercom buzzed. It was Carlos, the daytime concierge. "Mr. Ellis, I'm sorry to disturb you. There are individuals here, a Mr. and Mrs. Miller and a younger gentleman. They are insisting they are your family and must see you. They are becoming agitated." The fragile peace shattered. A white-hot, incandescent rage, purer than any I've felt before, ignited in my chest. They had signed a contract. They had taken my money for their silence and exile. And still they came. The audacity was infinite. I didn't invite them up. I went down. They were a sorry sight in the gleaming marble lobby, dripping on the rug, looking small and lost and entitled. My mother's eyes were red-rimmed. My father stood with his shoulders hunched. Daniel looked at the floor. "You have 10 seconds to explain why you are violating a legally binding settlement agreement before I call the police," I said, my voice low and dangerously steady. "Mark, please," my mother whimpered, taking a step forward. "We're your parents. We need to talk. We can't live like this, with this silence. We made a terrible mistake. We're here to ask for your forgiveness." She said the word forgiveness, as if it were a magic incantation that would erase the lawsuit, the testimony, the bribe. "You sold your right to ask for that," I stated. "The transaction is complete. You were paid for your lies, and I paid for your absence. The ledger is closed. There is nothing to discuss." "How can you be so heartless?" my father erupted, his face mottling with anger. "We raised you. We clothed you, fed you, sent you to college. This is how you repay us? By throwing us away like garbage." His words, meant to guilt me, had the opposite effect. They crystallized my resolve. "You did the bare minimum required by law," I replied, my tone glacial. "And you have treated every ounce of it, every scrap of food, every textbook, as a debt I incur at birth with compounded interest. You didn't want a son, you wanted a pension plan. When I stopped paying out, you liquidated your shares in me. You sold your testimony. You are not my family. You are creditors who settled their account. Now get out." My mother let out a wail. Daniel finally looked up, his eyes full of a toxic mix of hatred and despair. "You think you're so high and mighty in your glass tower," he spat. "You're just a lonely, miserable bastard who's too rich to know what real family is." "Perhaps," I said, turning to Carlos, who had been watching discreetly from his desk. "Carlos, these people are trespassing and are in violation of a court order. Please call the Chicago Police Department. Report a disturbance and a breach of a civil protection order. Provide them with the copies of the settlement agreement I gave you for the building files." The effect was instantaneous. My father's bluster vanished, replaced by fear. My mother's weeping turned to shocked hiccups. Daniel just stared, realizing I was not bluffing. This was not a family drama. This was a legal enforcement action. "You wouldn't," my father breathed. "Watch me." They left before the police arrived, scuttling out into the rain like cockroaches exposed alight. I gave a statement to the officers anyway, providing all the documentation. They took a report. It was a shot across the bow. The next violation would mean arrests, restraining orders, and potentially voiding the settlement and reopening the lawsuit for greater damages. That night, standing at the floor-to-ceiling window of my silent apartment, watching the city lights blur and swim in the rain, I felt the last ghost leave. The anger drained away, leaving not happiness, but a profound, unshakable quiet. It was the silence of a battlefield after the war has ended. It was the silence of a door firmly, permanently closed. The loneliness was real. It was a vast, empty space in my life where a wife and a family had once been. But in that emptiness, there was a terrible, hard-won freedom. It was mine. It was not borrowed, not contingent on someone else's approval or financial need. It was built on the scorched earth of their betrayal. And from that soil, I wanted to grow something new, something truly my own. I didn't know what that was yet. But for the first time in over a year, I felt a faint, tentative stirring of possibility. The story of Mark, Elena, Richard, Cynthia, and Daniel was over. Its final chapter had been written not with reconciliation, but with the unequivocal, unwavering enforcement of a boundary. The next story, whatever it would be, was mine alone to write. The silence was no longer an enemy. It was the blank page before the first word.